So this is the fifth video in the Revit to Real series that we're doing. And what we want to look at now is we've moved through the massing phase and getting physical models from the massing design work, the early conceptual design work that we've done inside of various programs, including Revit. And what we want to look at now is making a model from the design development phase. So this is still the same project. This is a more completed model that was shown to the client. And this was used for conceptual renderings and that kind of phase. So you can see this is pretty well detailed. It's still a little bit sloppy. You know, there's some weird joints here and there. It's not fully ready for construction documentation yet. It's not a full BIM model, but it's somewhere in that zone of completing design development. So this is the right time in terms of design and in terms of communication to begin looking at a physical model that's going to carry more detail, a significant amount of additional detail than a massing model. So what we're going to start doing, the first thing we've got to do in working with any model is understand what scale we're going to be working at, because scale is going to tell us how much detail we're going to be able to get out of the printer. For instance, you know, if I zoom in and look at these mullions, right now they're a fairly small mullion, and I know that our Rep 2, which is an FDM extrusion printer, once you get below, let's say, a 1/16 of an inch by a 1/16 of an inch, something along those lines, the reliability of that print is going to be pretty shaky. That's usually about the cutoff point. So I know for this kind of detail work, probably things like that are going to get hidden. I also know that if I'm going to print this model out, let me hide the roof really quick here, that I definitely do want to have some entourage elements in so that within the context of the model we can get a sense of what's happening with the scale of things, understanding the proportion of things. How big are the chairs that are going to be in the room? How do they fit in? How do they work? Things like that. So establishing that scale is going to give me the right understanding right from the very beginning of how to work through crafting this final model. So let's go ahead and get the roof back on. Select it, unhide and view element. So let's figure out our scale first. So let's go to, well, actually let me do this. The very first thing that I do, if I know I'm going to make a physical model of this, I know that there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to be doing some physical manipulation of the model here and there. And those might be okay as I move forward, but a lot of times I am going to go ahead and do a complete save as project, and I'm just going to drop this project down to, I'm just going to call it Camino Build Project, because what this allows me to do, this is sort of staking, it's kind of putting a flag in the ground saying this is the version that's going to become my physical model. So if I mess anything up, I still have a fallback in terms of the original model that I was working with. Because, you know, if something's not going to print correctly, I might need to put in a few supports, something like that, that aren't there in the final, that I don't want to show up later on down the line and have something messed up in terms of the design. You know, especially when you look at a little overhang like that, you know, I might want to build a support in there, something like that, that I cut out later of the physical model. And I sure don't want that to accidentally sneak its way into the construction documentation or impact the design. So, first couple of things that I know that I want to do, trees, those types of things, I want to handle those independently. So, I'm going to hide that category. I'm going to go ahead and turn shadows off so things manipulate, move around a little bit faster. And I'm going to go ahead and set up a brand new sheet. I already have a few sheets set up that were my presentation views. So let's just call this my base page. Rename, let's just call this model scale, because I want this sheet to be able to start working in a way that I can establish how big my print's going to be. So if I look at this page right now, this is a 42 inch by 30 inch sheet. And what I'm going to do is let's just start by putting the entry-level floor plan. Make sure I want to get the correct floor plan in. Yeah, let's use that entry-level floor plan here to bring into my model scale page. So I'm going to duplicate the view. I know I already have that in a sheet already. So I'm going to rename this guy to model scale plan. And we'll drag and drop that right onto the page. So currently the scale on this is 1/16 of an inch, which seems like it's going to be a pretty good scale for the model. And now I know the Rep 2 has a build plate of, it's just under 6 inches by 12 inches. So if I use my architecture, let's see here, not architecture, but the annotation tools, detail lines, I'm going to start drawing out a few lines here. So let's just go with a 1 foot long line. Now I'm drawing this sort of in paper space. So in other words, I'm drawing this, this is not in the model view. I'm actually drawing these lines on top of the drawing on my sheet, so I can begin to understand the right kind of size. So that is a 1 foot box. Let's go ahead and go, the depth of the plate is about 6 inches, or the depth, that would be the right term. And I know my build height is going to be about 6 inches. So, you can print, about a 12 inch by 6 inch by 6 inch cube on the Rep 2. So I know I can't get the entire width on the build plate. So I know I want to go ahead and probably establish a midpoint across, and the width will be what the width is. So let's just go ahead and slice it approximately right down the middle. And I know it's really going to be pushing it to get the print done if I'm at a 1/16 inch scale, to get it in 2 pieces. Let's draw one more line out here at 1 foot. It could work maybe, but from my experience in printing with the Rep 2, one of the biggest problems that we've had as of late, when we get prints that are fairly long, that go edge to edge, we get a little bit of warping on the corners, and we're working on some solutions to resolve that, but haven't had the best of luck with it yet. So I know if I can keep these prints rather than a full foot, if I could be more in the 5 inch range, let's say that these are, let's just do some quick measurements here. These are about 4 inches by, let's look at maybe about 5 inches this direction. If I run this edge to edge right here, it's 1 foot 8. If I divide that into thirds, I think I'll be a lot happier with how this comes together. So let's take a look at doing that. So I'm going to delete these extra lines and this dimension string. I'm going to slide this line back, and let's look at adding in 2 more lines here and here, except I need to make sure I draw them square. Detail line, just like that. I'm going to run a quick dimension string across them. Then I'm just going to set up each of those lines to be equidistant, so that way I know I'm dividing it accurately into thirds. And that essentially gives me a grid that I can print off each section of this model. So I'll have essentially 6 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The other option that I could do, I could drop this, I could change the size down from a 1/16 to say a 32nd, of an inch or something like that, and I might be able to get the entire project in the build space, but I would be cutting a significant amount of additional detail out. Going up in size, if I move this up to an 1/8 inch model, I'm starting to look at a model that's not 1'8" in out-to-out length, but I'm actually looking at a model that would be, over 3 feet long, which is getting to the point of being ridiculous for a project of this size and this scope. So this feels like a pretty good established setup to me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this base grid. I need to get these models or these lines into my model space. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm going to go ahead and select my view and activate it. And instead of detail lines this time, I'm going to use model lines, because the model lines will show up in model space. Now I can't use pick lines again, because the pick lines tool is only going to reference things that it can see, edges that it can see. So essentially what I'm going to do is just really simply sort of trace where these things are. So I'm going to come right along the base. And I'm not terribly worried about the precision of this. I want it to be close-ish. But I'm going to be taking measures in terms of how I subdivide the model so that all of this stuff will work out. So let's establish this next set of grids. I was way off on that one, but again, I'm just going to run a quick dimension string. This is sort of my lazy version of doing an array. And then I delete the dimension string. And now if I deactivate my view and I go into my model, you can see that that grid that I have set up is something that is visible all the way across. So that gives me my scale. Oh, looks like I'm missing one more line that needs to come through. Midpoint. To midpoint. And it doesn't look like I drew that in the exact same plane. Let's go back to entry-level drawing again here. Let's make sure I get that in the same spot. It put that line in, basically it put that line in a different reference plane, and I want to make sure that those things line up. So I should see two lines here, one below the other. There we go, get rid of that guy. So I've got the grid in now so that I can start dividing the model up into pieces. So before I start doing that, I also want to go ahead and swap out some of the entourage elements. And I'm not going to do all of that during the video, but I do want to show the basic setup of getting ready to do this. Because there are certain things that I know universally are not going to work. The first one would be tables and chairs, things like that, and chairs. So I'm just going to use the chair as an example, and then when I start up the next video, you'll see the different ideas that I have in terms of swapping things out, and then I'll include some photographs of the final prints so you can see the kind of results that we're able to get. So again, I'm going to go ahead and hide the roof, and I'm going to select one of the chairs, and essentially I just want to make a new family of this, and then we'll swap all of these chairs out with a file that's going to print really easily. So I'm just going to click Edit Family to open up that chairs family in a new file, and I'm going to do the big R, Save As, Family, because I don't want to overwrite this. And I'm going to be a little bit sloppy again and just write this to my desktop. I should have a folder someplace on my computer for printable objects for Revit families. But for right now, I'm just going to keep it on my desktop. So this is, let's just call this print as a prefix so I can find them easily. Print chair. Pretty simple name, kind of dull. Extrusion. I want it to be about the exact same size, so I'm going to select the outside edges, I hope. That, and that. I'm going to trim those together really quick. And then I'm going to go ahead and finish this extrusion and pull it up so it is the same height as the base. I'm not going to worry about the chair back simply because I know that unless I allow this chair at a 16th inch scale to have a chair back that's larger than a 16th inch at a final print size, which means, you know, to scale that would need to be a 1 foot thick chair back. It's just not going to happen. I don't think it's going to print reliably. That box, however, is larger than a foot by a foot, so it's going to be slightly larger than a 16th of an inch by a 16th of an inch when it prints. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete portions of the chair. I'm going to switch this to a wireframe so I can see through everything, make sure I get everything deleted. Deleted too much. There we go. So that's removed everything from that, and I'm simply left with a little box right there. And I'm going to do another save, and then I'm going to load the print chair into my project. So let's go back to that 3D view I was in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to over select because I want to grab all these chairs in one swoop here. So I'm going to just go, probably right around in here and start a great big lasso like that. And I'm going to use my filter right down here at the bottom to say I really only want to select my furniture. So that's all that's remaining in my selection. And I'm going to change that particular model from that standard chair. I'm going to look for my print prefix, print chair, and those guys are ready to go. I'm going to do the exact same technique for this table and chair, you know, just making sort of a cylinder there with the chairs around it. For desks, other furniture that might be in there, that type of thing, and you'll be able to see those in the next video. But that's basically the process. And again, using that filter function allows me to really quickly swap all of these things out. And this is another reason why I like to go ahead and do a save as when I'm working through these projects. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and work through swapping out, or not necessarily swapping out, but hiding some of the things that I know aren't going to print well. And one of the key things are the windows and window mullions. So if you look at the geometry of a window, I know, first of all, I know that the mullions aren't going to print. But then the next problem is I also know that the glass, the Makerbot Rep 2 is going to do its very best attempt to also print that thin piece of glass, which I really don't want. I just assume those be open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select that curtain wall system and hide in view. And I know I pretty much want them gone everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and say hide in view category. And that's when I can realize, well, I've gotten a little bit too much. It looks like it's hidden all my walls. Okay, so I know that's not going to work for this particular case in terms of how this was built. So let's undo that, Control Z. So I know from each section what I'm going to need to do is hide in view element. And that pulls me down to the basic structure that's holding the window in place. Now the last piece that we need to start watching for, and we'll show this in the next video, is where geometry is overlapping. When you see an area like this sort of massing model that's intersecting with this wall, I know that those things can cause some printing problems as well. The last thing that I do want to do is things like doors. The door frame, again, is going to be too small of a detail, and the door itself, a lot of times those are too thin. They're not going to print very well either. So that's something, hopefully I can probably just do those as an entire category and get rid of the doors pretty much everywhere in one click. And it looks like that's worked pretty well. Oh, last thing too, handrails. Definitely not going to print those, but we do want to replace those with something that's more like a solid wall. So I'm going to do that by establishing for my floor plan view. And I essentially want to draw right over the top of those with a lower wall, and then we'll hide the handrails immediately after that. So I'm just going to do a wall, and I'm going to use a generic 8-inch wall, which is thicker, wider than what I would typically want a handrail to be, but I also know in creating that additional width I'm going to get a print that's going to be more reliable. And I'm going to go ahead and set my height, my unconnected height, at 42 inches, standard guardrail height. And let's draw that in with a center line. So I can essentially trace right down the middle of this handrail. So again, thicker than I would like, but something that I know is going to print is more important. So you can see, it looks like I've got it actually at the wrong level. So let's go ahead and say my base constraint is probably level 2 dorms. Nope, second level. There it goes. So I place that right on the second level, and then I can come in and I should be able to select my guardrail, hide in view element, and I can essentially go through and replace my guardrails with that solid wall that I know is going to print correctly. And of course, it looks like I've got one more adjustment to make there with this wall. And that was second level, just like that. So making those adjustments get the model in a position that is set up and ready to print. And as we section it off in the next video, each piece needs another quick inspection before you send it out to make sure that each piece is going to print correctly.